You ever hear of a brand that got so big, so dominant, that its name just became the machine itself? Well, that is the incredible story of Drott Manufacturing. This is a company whose inventions didn't just help build our world, they literally changed the words people used on the job site.
So let me ask you, have you ever heard of a draught? Chances are, probably not, right? Unless you're deep in the construction or forestry game. But, for decades, that name was as common as saying Kleenex for a tissue or Band-Aid for a bandage. So how in the world does that happen?
And it's absolutely true. I mean, you go to places like the UK or Australia, and the brand name Drott just straight up became the word for any crawler loader of its kind. You wouldn't be on a job site yelling for the tracked loader. No way. You just say, hey, get the Drott.
So this is that story. We're going to dive into how a relatively small company from Wisconsin created machines that were so revolutionary, so game-changing, that their name just got absorbed into the vocabulary of an entire industry. It's an amazing tale.
All right, let's kick things off. Section 1, From Woods to Workshop. This is all about how one man's tough, hands-on experience really planted the seed for a revolution. So our story really kicks off with a guy named Edward Drott, and he wasn't some suit in an office, not at all. Get this. At just 14 years old, he was a lumberjack working in the super rugged timber industry of northern Wisconsin. So he was seeing firsthand every single day the brutal limits of manual labor. He didn't just see a problem, he lived it. And that, right there, made all the difference. And you can totally see his ambition just by looking at how fast the company grew. He starts out in 1916 just serving the local loggers in Butternut, Wisconsin. But pretty quick, he realizes, okay, I gotta think bigger than this. By 1923, he's reorganized, moved to Wausau. A year later, he's in the industrial hub of Milwaukee. And then, just 4 years after that, in 1928, he opens this grand, almost palatial showroom. I mean, this wasn't just a workshop anymore. This was a statement. He was telling the world, Drop It is here to make a serious mark.
Okay, which brings us right to section 2. The bucket that did everything. And believe me, this is the invention that really put Drott on the map and pretty much changed the construction game forever.
So, what was the big problem Drott was trying to solve here? Well, it was actually pretty simple, but it was a huge headache and super costly. Think about it. On a typical job site, a contractor needed a whole fleet of machines, a bulldozer to push dirt, a scraper to level it all out, a bucket loader to lift stuff, and a clamshell to grab things. We're talking 4 different, very expensive machines for one job. And Drott's solution? Well, it was just brilliant in its simplicity. He patented what became known as the 4-in-1 bucket. It was this one single attachment that, thanks to a really clever split bucket design, could do all 4 of those jobs. It could act as a standard bucket for lifting, sure, but it could also be a bulldozer for pushing, a clamshell for grabbing, and a scraper for leveling the ground. Literally 4 machines in one attachment. Genius. And the impact of this? Oh, it was massive. Just massive. All of a sudden, one machine with one operator could do the work of 4. I mean, imagine you're a small or medium-sized contractor. This was an absolute game changer. It just slashed their costs and made them unbelievably more efficient overnight. This success was so complete, so total, that it led to something we call a genericized trademark. You see this all the time, right? With names like Kleenex or Band-Aid. The brand name just becomes the regular word for the product. Well, that's exactly the level of market dominance the 4-in-1 bucket hit. It wasn't a crawler loader anymore. It was just a Drott. But here's the thing. A great invention is really only half the battle, right? I mean, how do you get it into the hands of people in every corner of the globe? Well, that brings us to our next section, an unstoppable partnership. So Drott figured out how to scale up its innovation, and they did it through a perfect partnership with International Harvester, who were, an absolute giant in the tractor industry. It was the perfect match. Drott brought the brilliant engineering, the patents, the 4-in-1 bucket itself, and International Harvester, they provided the powerful tractor platforms to mount it on, and, this is the crucial part, their massive global sales network. Each company had exactly what the other one needed. And the result of this team-up was the International Drott line of machines. And throughout the 1950s, these things were sold globally and were just everywhere. They completely dominated construction sites. This partnership is what took Drott from being a clever Wisconsin company to a true global powerhouse. But Drott wasn't a one-hit wonder, not by a long shot. So moving into Section 4, we're going to see how the company kept evolving, pivoting from just making awesome attachments to building entirely new revolutionary machines of their own. Man, the 1960s were just an unbelievably transformative decade for them. They totally embraced the hydraulic revolution. In '62, they bought the rights to this French hydraulic backhoe called the Yumbo. Then boom, just a few years later in '65, they introduced their own revolutionary Cruis-Air wheeled excavator. Then in '68, they invent the feller buncher for logging. And in that same year, they became so successful that they were acquired by a massive corporation. What a whirlwind.
So let's break down those two huge inventions. First up was the Cruis-Air. Now, this was a self-propelled excavator on wheels that could actually drive itself down the road at up to 30 miles per hour. And you might think, okay, so what? But the big deal was, before this, you needed a giant, expensive trailer to haul an excavator from one job to the next. The Cruis-Air completely got rid of that problem, which made it absolutely perfect for city work and road repairs. And then, in a really cool full-circle moment, Edward's son, Edward Drott, took the company right back to its logging roots. The industry was facing a huge labor crisis, and manual tree felling was just incredibly dangerous work. So he invented the feller buncher. This amazing machine let a single operator, sitting safely inside a steel cab, grab a tree, cut it at the base, and stack it neatly. We're talking hundreds of trees a day. It totally transformed the safety and the efficiency of modern forestry. Just an incredible leap forward.
And all of this brings us to our final section, a legacy cast in steel. Because the story of Drott doesn't really end when the company gets sold. In a weird way, that's where its true legacy gets locked in forever.
So yeah, in 1968, Drott was bought by a big conglomerate called Tenneco and then merged into its JI Case division. But you gotta understand, this wasn't a story of failure. It was the ultimate validation. Drott's technology had become so essential, so fundamental to the industry that was just too valuable to stay independent. It needed to be everywhere.
And if you look around today, the Drott DNA is still everywhere. That 4-in-1 bucket concept, it's now a standard attachment you can get from basically any brand. The feller buncher, it became the essential tool for modern, safer forestry. That Cruis-Air concept of a high-speed excavator, it lives on in all the modern wheeled excavators we see today. Even their carry deck crane line is still around, now part of the Manitowoc Company. The ideas were just so powerful, they outgrew the company itself. And this quote here really just sums it all up perfectly. The legacy of Drott Manufacturing is found not in a surviving corporate entity, but in the standardized mechanisms of modern heavy industry. You're not going to find a brand new machine with a Drott name on it today, but its legacy is right there, cast in the steel of the machines that build our world.
Which kind of leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about, right? What are the innovations happening today that are becoming so essential, so baked into the background of our lives, that just like the Drott, we're already starting to forget they were ever a revolutionary invention in the first place?